Hello, everyone. Welcome to the You Don't Look Like an Engineer podcast.
Yep.
Today we have the pleasure of interviewing Gretchen Gagel. Gretchen is, don't know if we can mention the book just yet. I was just going to say the author of, but can we mention it?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, author. I am an author of a book, Building Women Leaders, a blueprint for women thriving in construction is one of the roles that I play, along with boards and advisement and executive coaching. I love the title of this podcast because my roots in construction, my father was a construction equipment dealer. He dealt Komatsu, Barbara Green pavers, Heister. And when I told him I wanted to go to engineering school, he told me I couldn't do that girls didn't study engineering. And in fact, when I turned down Harvard to go to engineering school, he disowned me. And we made up years later, but I know in his heart, he just thought it was too difficult a road for me, that it just wasn't an appropriate career. And out of engineering school, I was hired as Ralston Purina's first operations manager running manufacturing plants, which I did for 6 or 7 years. And then after my MBA, I saw an ad in the paper. We used to answer ads in the paper way back when. And for the largest investment banking management consulting firm in construction, MI in America. And I was hired on in 1994. I think I was woman number 2 in 45 years there, and started advising. Well, I started advising contractors, but then built a new business for them, advising on the client side, large clients like General Motors and Intel, about how to deliver capital programs and projects in the most efficient way. And I fell in love with the construction industry. So that's how I got started.
Wow. I don't think I can go past the fact that, wow, how did you navigate the relationship with your father during, your career? Like, it must have been really difficult to be okay with that or navigate that relationship at that time.
Yeah.
You're
Up
also
until
very young.
then, I guess for context and just understanding your both relationship, was he a big influence in your life and were you guys close?
No, I was kind of an afterthought. I was 12 years after my siblings, and I shouldn't say that. He really wanted me to show quarter horses. We built on the last piece of my grandfather's ranch and had raised black Angus cattle and quarter horses. I was very successful showing quarter horses. He was proud of me. We had that in common. Great memories of us fishing in Colorado growing up. And he got over it. I mean, he was very proud of me. A very funny story. I was driving to do the noon news in Denver, and I thought, who can I call and tell them I'm on the news? So I called him. He was retired in Colorado by that time, and said, hey, Dad, I'm going to be on the news. And I was probably, 42 at the time. And someone asked me about women, and I started telling the story of him disowning me. And I was like, and you just called him and told him you're on the news. And so he's watching you tell the story. But he was very proud of me later. But he definitely had a paradigm in his head about what women should and shouldn't do. I graduated from high school in 1982, so it was a long time ago.
Times have really changed after that, but it's still like it would have been a completely different story.
Absolutely.
Different life.
What I'm curious to know, sorry if I can jump in, because I guess it was a different time and times have changed, but how did you manage to cultivate that mindset that wasn't influenced by what, society thought women should and shouldn't do?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. People ask me about that, how I had the strength. Well, I had the money to pay for university thanks to an inheritance. So I was in a position to say, great, I'll go pay for uni. And I had a couple of teachers in math and science, specifically a female chemistry and physics teacher, Jan Sear, who I stay in touch with to this day. I literally saw her like 3 months ago, that encouraged me, told me I could do whatever I wanted. And I got invited to a recruiting session at the Naval Academy for National Merit Finalists, 300 of us, mostly boys, but some girls. And they taught classes at that about each of the different types of engineering. And that's when I went, wow, I think I'm a mechanical engineer. I think that's, what I'm interested in. So I just had a series of fortunate events. And then I picked the university I went to because they had a strong cooperative work program. So I never went home. I left home at 17. Wow. And I worked for Lone Star Gas doing pipeline design. Well, I started out doing drafting. We used to do that by hand with pencils back then. And yeah, that was a great work experience while I was in uni. So it just kind of all fell together.
I think Laura can really relate to that drafting one. And
drafting
probably feel your pain if you do it with pencils, yeah.
Probably not the drawing by hand. I always took my hat off to people that started drafting when that was, this basically the tools that you use. I feel like even though now we have technology and all of these software that are really helpful, I don't think we really understand a lot of
not. Yeah.
the different, I guess, dimensions and everything that you guys were taught. It was completely different. Yeah, so I had my heart up to you.
Thank you. You wouldn't know I took drafting when you see my writing now. It's ridiculously bad. You'd think I went to medical school.
That's one of the things, I guess. So as you were talking at the start, even though it wasn't a proper introduction, at the very, very start, you've held significant leadership roles throughout your career. And I guess what have been some of the most defining moments that shaped your leadership style? That's something that I've been really interested in.
Yeah, I was very fortunate at Ralston Purina. They put you through an extensive training program. You had to work every job in the plant, every shift. It took months. And then they let go almost half of the trainees after that. If you couldn't get along with the union employees and you didn't understand how a plant really worked. And that was a great fundamental. But you think I had 800 employees I was responsible for when I was 26, 27 years old in a failing company and a failing baby food company that we'd bought from Nestle. And they told us we had a year to turn it around or they were going to shut it down. And that's where I don't know if I learned humility, but I knew I'd never run a baby food plant. I'd run a dog food plant and a cereal plant. But I knew I had 800 people that knew how to fix the problems that we had. And we went from kind of a check your brain at the door, command and control mentality, and self-directed work teams were really hot. This would have been like 89, 90. And so I really learned as a leader, you don't have to have all the answers. You need to empower people. It's like Amy Edmondson in psychological safety, right? You need to give people the freedom to take risk, to solve problems in their jobs where they're the expert. Leaders set direction. We knew we had to we knew the numbers we needed to hit within 12 months. We had definitions of what the problems were. We had a lost time accident every 3 days when I first started there. And then we went a month without a lost time accident in 2 months. But I think that's where I really learned the fundamentals of explain what's important and motivate people to use their brains to fix the problems. You don't have to be the leader that knows everything.
So good. That's, ultimate leadership style. Very, I won't say unconventional, but less commonly seen now for people to have to work, every sort of division, say in whatever industry they're in, especially, I guess, engineering. That's probably a bit difficult, but at least, say, for example, someone gets into civil engineering, they don't really get to try what everyone is up to before, they start climbing the ranks. Do you have any thoughts of that? Like new graduates will be coming in and 2 or 3 years later, you'll start looking at them, PMing and stuff. What do you think culturally has shifted, and is it the right thing that we're doing in that sense?
Yeah. Some of the best people I've worked with in construction, I'm thinking of one woman in particular who was on the contractor side and then went to the gas utility side, or a gentleman in Sydney who was in the contractor side and went to the energy side. People that have exposure. We at Brinkman Construction hired architects as project managers, and people that understand different aspects of the business are more well-rounded. If you only understand your piece and you don't understand how it fits into everything, that's why everybody went through that training program.
That's so good.
Accountants, logistics, everybody had to learn how the plant operated. It's funny because when I ran a nonprofit foundation years later, we used to have strategic team time for 2 to 3 hours a week. We thought strategically, which people think is crazy, right? We had a different tactical meeting, but really training them on how to think strategically. But about twice a year, I'd have what keeps the light bulbs on around here? And we'd do basic accounting and finance. Like, this is how much money we have to raise, and this is how our budget's set up. And it didn't matter if you were a fundraiser or an event planner. Everybody needs to understand how everybody's job makes that whole budget go together and keeps as I said, called it the keeping the light bulbs on session. So I think we don't give people enough credit for the need to understand the big picture in order to be held accountable. And this isn't about being soft. I mean, I've let people go not with a good skill fit for what they were doing, but to be held accountable for the piece that you have being able to understand the bigger picture and feel like a part of the bigger team is really helpful.
Absolutely. Oh, I do definitely see the value in that, and that's something I've always sort of strived for, but always, I won't say always, but very frequently had to face a lot of resistance, especially from leadership being like, oh, we've just hired you for this role, and we don't really, if you, I think what I heard a few times was, oh, if you try to get the well-rounded approach, you'll be like years behind the people that are in this niche field, getting their skills in that. And I didn't really understand that argument, so to speak.
Yeah, well, you need to hone your skills I think of 3 roles in life. You're a subject matter expert. Like I have a PhD in leadership. You're asking me about leadership. I'm being a subject matter expert on leadership, right? I've studied it. I've studied it about myself. I coach leaders. Then you have management, which is allocating resources and making that, and then leading and the vision. It's important to hone your subject matter expert skills, and that's what they're saying, like do what you were hired to do. But if you don't understand the big picture, I don't think you can add as much value to a team and an organization. And in studying agility in my PhD, in my dissertation, my gosh, I'm actually using my dissertation. I identified leader behaviors that support and don't support agility. I studied 126 business units in 47 corporations, all with more than 1,000 employees. I joke I had to leave America because I used up all my favors to get all my companies from my PhD study. But one of the behaviors that did not support agile routines, agility, and nimbleness was being overly structured about people's roles, because then you don't have information flowing. Everybody's in their silo with their head down, and you don't have as much nimbleness and collaboration and problem solving.
I think that is something that as part of the engineering industry, at least I have witnessed that. And you see, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you see the effect of it, of being so rigid in the way you do things in the organization, in the culture, and how people don't really feel like they belong, or, like some people don't really feel like they can align with the company, mission, vision, and goals. And essentially, I guess as a technical person, they might be like, well, it's all right, like they are here to do the job. But in reality, when you don't feel that as a human, you don't have job satisfaction, or you are not as productive. And productivity is a thing that we talk about a lot, especially now with the new hybrid way of working. And a lot of people are like, oh, if you don't work from the office, like productivity levels drop. And a lot of people are thinking about like, well, if they were really passionate and saw the bigger picture and know and understand what achieving something as a team means, then they wouldn't be dropping the productivity. So it has nothing to do with, working from home or what they work. And I know that I've touched on a few different roles or like a few different topics here, but I think I can see it straight away in engineering. And a lot of people don't really understand the many layers of leadership. So it's great to have you here so you can explain them to us.
We're not, I was only allowed 4 classes outside of engineering. I took a psychology class. Gosh, a psychology degree would do me a lot of good right now, because we're dealing with people. When I used to get called in on difficult projects, really difficult. I got called in on a project that was a $40 million guaranteed maximum price, and they ended up with a $20 million change order. That's a problem project. It wasn't a technical problem. It was a people problem. It was a communication problem, a relationship problem. And we're not given the skills in engineering school. In fact, my son's an engineer. My son's a mining engineer, and was made a plant manager at 25. Following right along in my footsteps, being young and running something. And he said, wow, I'm glad I took that one management course in engineering school, right? And so, yeah, I hope it would be great if we could find a way to get a little bit of the liberal arts and human behavioral into the technical. And I have so much respect for engineers. I love that I started out in engineering, and yes, you have to take dynamics, you have to take heat and mass transfer and all those fun classes that we had to take. But how we could incorporate within that technical education a little bit more about leadership and relationships and how that's what makes the world happen. I think that would be a good thing.
Absolutely.
I agree 100%. And I think that, a lot of, again, the issues certain engineering firms have regarding, again, the projects blowing up on budget, or projects that are run poorly. It's to do with leadership, and they are like, they can be like extremely knowledgeable in the technical field, but at the end of the day, as you said, there's a lot of people problems within those projects.
Absolutely.
Yeah. One of the best projects I worked on right before I moved to Australia, so this is pretty recent, 6 years ago. It's a 3-year program with General Motors. It had to go fast. They didn't tender it. They sole sourced it. They reached out to their most trusted engineering and construction management firms, and they brought me in. We started with my team, and we started with 7 executives, and we got aligned on culture and objectives and all that. It took weeks. I mean, things were being designed and stuff. It wasn't like everybody was sitting there waiting for us to finish. And then we took it to 25 leaders, and then we took it to 60. And if somebody didn't play along with the culture of lean and collaboration and innovation, they were replaced ruthlessly. And it created such an amazing team. Everybody wants to be on a winning team. And it had a code name, M5. Back, I can say that now because it doesn't mean anything. I asked them one day about a year into it, it was a 3-year program, what does M5 stand for? And they said, somebody was listening to a Maroon 5 song on the radio, and that's why they named it M5. But everybody had shirts that said M5. It didn't say the company name. It was M5. And everybody understood what winning looked like. And everybody was motivated. They didn't want to be the team player that let everybody down. Very, very successful program.
I guess if you were to boil it down to say maybe like 5 or so things that they were doing right, that people can, as a listener, you can find a value and apply it within any team you're in right now, what would you say attributed to the success of M5?
Well, that and another team that I worked with at an energy company that was missing their capital budget by an average of 14% a year, and we got them down to 1% in a year and a half. They identified the characteristics of a high-performing team, and then they measured themselves. Athletes, look at athletes. They're constantly looking at statistics. There's a reason there's a halftime in American football, right? My poor Chiefs couldn't come back even though they pulled it around in the second half of the Super Bowl. But they're in there. They're looking at video. They're evaluating themselves. And so if you say, great, high-performing teams have high levels of trust. High-performing teams clearly understand the end goal. Different players know their role. And then you measure that and you get better and you focus on what it means to be a great team. I think that's one thing. And then, as I said, ruthlessly addressing people. If we've defined the culture and the behaviors and you're not playing around, you're not playing in the sandbox with everybody, coaching. And if coaching's not working, you trade the player out. And so I really think you have to focus on that. I think those were 2 of the most important things. And we created a vision statement and our values. Everybody signed it. Every site, there were 4 sites, 3 in the US and 1 in Mexico. Everybody walked by that every day when they went onto that job site. So visual reminders and people talking about and surveying the teams regularly about the behaviors and making sure that people were really collaborating and innovating.
That's really interesting. I love the analogies not analogies, but the stories about sport and how they relate with leadership, because I'm watching a documentary on the NBA actually, and it really resonated, like team players that, are selfish, I'm going to call it selfish, or like play on their own terms and they don't really take the whole team into account are probably the ones, that make the whole, like that could ruin a game. They could ruin the result. Like everyone has to be pretty much on the same page. And I love looking at it that way because it makes it very digestible also for me to understand how it is that sometimes in the organizations that we work at, things go wrong. And, things like micromanagement that when they flare up, you understand how they have such a negative impact on other, people and their performance, or like the trust element that you spoke about is something that, micromanagement doesn't really align with trust. I think they are completely opposite. It's like you are constantly over someone. Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of things that come to mind, and I'm like, interesting that the industry is a little bit, I don't know, like I don't want to say behind. We need a little bit more work in leadership. If we were to look into the leaders that we have in the industry today and they wanted to like really understand how they can improve, like one of the things that I think about, as I said, in micromanagement, how can a leader not falling to the place of want to micromanage or be super controlling on the team and the tasks and the results and how they are performing? Is there something that they can sort of like do to work around that?
Absolutely. I think leadership starts with understanding yourself. I just wrote an article about this for Inside Construction. And when we think about leader, we think leader, person they're leading, which is important. But understanding yourself, I call it grounded self-leadership in the book. And by the way, the book is for men too. It's a really darn good book on leadership, and it's about allyship for women. So I want all the men out there to read this book too. It's not, even though it says building women leaders, most of it is not gender specific. But grounded self-leadership is saying my authenticity is grounded in my personal values, like what I stand for. I stand for trust. I stand for collaboration, fairness, authenticity. It's about having courage and humility. Courage to make hard decisions, but humble, you don't have all the answers. It's about your brain, and I love neuroscience and critical thinking and resting your brain. We only have 4 hours of cognitive time in our brain a day, period. We try and use them for 12. It's like the battery on your laptop, it's going down. And then the last piece of grounded self-leadership is how you take that personal brand out into the world. And then, to your point about not micromanaging, we cannot walk around with a hammer in our hand thinking everybody's a nail. Every person is unique. And I use the disc profile is just a quick and dirty. I just did a session with a crane rigging company in Perth last week. I use the DISC profile to understand some really basic things. People that want detail, people that don't want detail, people that want more autonomy, less autonomy, people that want to be included, people that leave me alone. I would go lock me in an office and do my work. So that takes a lot of time as a leader to understand the unique needs and motivations of every single person. And this great analogy just popped into my mind for the very first time. If you were going to go ride a camel, you would do something. If you were going to go ride a horse, you would do something different. If you were going to go ride an elephant, you would do something different, right? You wouldn't treat an elephant like a horse, like a camel. I don't know why I'm thinking about this today. I must have seen some subliminal message about elephants or camels or something. People are the same way. You cannot walk around with a hammer in your hand and think this person's motivated, this person, I joke like the stormtroopers coming off the Star Wars ships. And so and it takes time. Edgar Schein calls them level 2 relationships. I see you as a whole person. I understand what makes you tick. And that, once again, it's not about being soft. I'm a tough leader. I hold people accountable, but I take the time to understand them. That doesn't mean I'm perfect. I mean, gosh, I could sit here for another hour and tell you all the mistakes I've made as a leader. And that's the other thing. We try and learn from those mistakes.
That's very fascinating.
I feel like we could sit here for hours and just pick your brain because there's just so much to get into.
We might have you again.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's so many questions.
42 years since I was first an intern, so I've got 42 years worth of stories. And that's, Wiley asked me to write this book. I did not raise my hand and say I wanted to write this book. Wiley found me on LinkedIn. And as you can imagine, the number of women with 40 years of construction and a PhD in leadership is a very, very small community. And they said, will you write this book? And it's really a culmination of I just stepped down as chair of Brinkman Construction. I'm on the GHD Engineering Global Risk Committee, so I'm still in leadership positions. I'm coaching leaders and executives. And this darn PhD, I got crazy and went and got, and I really tried to make the book something enduring about the basics of understanding yourself, understanding how to build relationships, understanding how to build high-performing teams and cultures and organizations that make this greatness happen.
That sounds like a very not just, engineering and construction. Anyone can get so much value from the book. And I love the applicability of it. Obviously, we want everyone to jump in and read and get the most value out of the book. But you mentioned this disc profiling. I don't know if you could run through like a really quick scenario on what a leader would have to do to be able to go through this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You can Google it. There's free versions, DISC, disc. I literally, the first one I took was on paper in 1994. Now we take them electronically. And the D is someone who's very decisive, dominant, more opinionated, more urgent. I say that as a true D. Action oriented. Let's get going. The impatient person that's looking at their watch 5 minutes into the conversation saying, hey, haven't we talked about this enough? And everybody's a mix of these. I is results through people. It's the people that really care. How's everybody feeling about this change? They don't want to be left out of things. D's like to be in control. That's the thing they don't want to lose. I's, these are the ones walking by the glass conference room saying, why is everybody in that conference room and I'm not in there? You know, they really want to be engaged with things. S is logic and process. They get a lot of work done. A, B, C, D, E, A, B, C, D, E, like that logical process. So when the D walks in their office and says, hey, we're going to do A, G, H, good luck, and walks back out, it just sends them over the edge because they've broken their sausage machine, so to say. And then C's are conscientiousness, that's attention to detail and correctness. These are the people that write, you know, how we're supposed to do things and the rules and find your typos, my typos. And it doesn't measure what you can or can't be. It measures your natural tendencies. So I have very low attention to detail. I finished a 172-page dissertation. I finished a 350-page book. You have to dig deep. It's knowing where you have to dig deep. And then as a leader, it's surrounding yourself with people that complement your DISC profile, not the people like you, the people not like you, so that they bring those different skills to the team.
It's fascinating because I'm like, wow, so there's an explanation for what I am and for what people are. And maybe...
But also that there's a blend, like there's definitely more than one that I relate to in all of that. So I can see how you see everyone has at different times more or less tendencies of one or the other, depending on the stage they are in life.
Yeah, some people have all four. They're completely even, which means they can be confusing to people because 1 minute they're on the detail and the next minute they're on the urgency and the next minute they're on to that. It's interesting. I ran this program with this company in Perth last week and I think 16 people in the room and there were 3 or 4 in every category, which is awesome. I mean, but then how do you leverage the strengths? Don't make people go do something they're not strong at, right? It's like having the right Jim Collins, Good to Great, one of my favorite business books, have the right people in the right seats in the bus where you're taking advantage of their natural skills.
And that can also be like link or, you know, in sports, we see it all the time, you know, like people actually make the most of their genetics or like, you know, I guess what they naturally are good at. It's so much easier for them to better perform. So I also wanted to ask you, because you were talking about psychology and, you know, how it would be really helpful if you had a psychology degree right now. Which I find fascinating. I guess my question is a little bit different from what we were talking about, but before we jump into a different subject, I wanted to get in it and ask, as you've been working in leadership, have you been able to learn different things about yourself and your style? Like, have people mirror a lot of the stuff that you probably weren't really aware of? And how did that sort of like all happen for you?
Yeah. I have, it's actually sitting right over there. I have what's called a learning journal. I have been anonymously reviewed by my team twice a year for years and years and years and years and years. I don't remember what prompted me to start it, but I have learned so much about myself. Great leaders create those feedback loops, and we all have blind spots. Radical Candor is a great book by Kim Scott. It's about having the courage and care to say to someone, hey, you know, you do this and it makes people crazy, or you're less effective because you do this. And I tell people, if I stop giving you feedback, then I don't care anymore, so you should be worried. But my learning journal, I sat down when I got to Australia and went through all my different I've done 10 things like the DISC profile, Enneagram, Insights, you name it. Went through all my reviews and I made 1 page of everything that's awesome about Gretchen and 1 page about everything I need to work on. I'm not a natural good listener. Now, when I'm at a cocktail party, I try and focus on what color eyes do you have? Because I know if I'm looking at your eyes and I'm thinking what color, then I'm listening to you. So I think it's really critical to understand and not try and work on everything at once and not try and be something that you're not. Once again, you have to be authentic to yourself. but really deeply understanding and reflecting. I go off and do a goal setting weekend every year about my personal goals by myself. Yeah.
I think we all need to do that. I try to do goal setting every year, and it really helps you, I guess, make it happen. That's all I can say.
Well, and it's interesting because like right now I'm on a weekly goal setting. This in red on my learning. This is my regular journal, the Wizard of Oz. Sometimes I have to just buckle down and say, here's my goals for the week. I feel overwhelmed. Here's what's manageable. And then sometimes I'm doing like, here's my 3-month goals, or here's my 1-year goals, or here's my 5-year goals. I think about it at different times in different ways, but why am I goal oriented? I don't know. I think life's worth achieving things, and so I set goals.
Okay, I have my last question, so can I promise? So you were talking about how you write a page of good things and bad things. I think a lot of people that listen to this podcast, and just a lot of people in general, struggle to take feedback / criticism. I understand that delivery is key for any of these two, but how can we take it a little bit more, I guess, detach ourselves, our sense of self and worth from this feedback? How have you done it in the past, having your team reviewing you?
Yeah. First, you need to understand that feedback is one person's opinion. So I am also reviewed by all the students I teach. I'm about to kick off another quarter at the University of Denver. And I had a student call me arrogant. And I know in an anonymous review, but I know exactly which student it was. Didn't take a brain scientist to figure out. And I sat back because I really try and have humility. Someone calling me arrogant is hurtful to me. But I shouldn't say but. And I know that being a female executive in construction, I have to be very confident in what I do. And for that person, I crossed the line. I walk right next to confidence and arrogance. And for him, I crossed the line. I think there's a grain of truth in what everyone says, and not beating yourself up with that, but saying, did I cross that line? Like, what do I learn from this? How could I have displayed a little bit more humility? And the other thing to realize is that I read a great article about this in the New York Times that I now can't find. Everyone has a different lived experience of you. So we think we're us, right? But you have an experience with me. You have an experience with me. And not everybody is going to be a good fit. And just understanding that we're all a work in progress. I have a coach. People are like, oh my gosh, you're 60 years old and you have a coach. It's like, I'm not done. I'm not done learning. And so if you take it in the spirit of Carol Dweck, like growth mindset, that wonderful book, I still have things to learn. I still have things to get better at. I think when I give feedback, I try and focus on the skill and not the person. This is the skill that's lacking, and not make it a personal attack, because personal attacks are not helpful.
Such a good thing to practice. Yeah, thank you so much. There's so much value to get out of that, especially sometimes in these days where people feel not fearful, but apprehensive to give, the radical candor, what's really going on in their mind. It's more inclined to say, oh, things are okay. But I think you can't really progress if no one's showing you your blind spots. Yeah,
absolutely.
You've been through so many different new things, in your life. Obviously, you started off in construction, then you ended up, on a leadership pathway. You've also got your own podcast. You've written a book. There's just so much. You got your PhD.
Moved to a new country, started a company over here. I knew one person when I got here 6 years ago.
Oh my goodness. Each of those things, any one of those things, I think jumping from one to the other, always being in the beginner's shoes can create a lot of self-doubt, just perception issues, not to yourself, but identity. You're recarving your own identity so many times. How did you, I guess, looking back in the past, not get derailed by that? Keep, progressing? Like, how did you maintain your sense of identity while it's changing so rapidly?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I've said I'm a really confusing brand to people. When I stumbled upon the opportunity to start a women's leadership program in the pipeline industry when I first came here, and I had no idea how I was going to earn a living. I was 54 years old and went, okay, I'm going to go to Australia with my Australian partner. We only thought we were going to be here for a couple of years. I fell in love with Australia. But I knew that once I started a women's leadership program, which I'd never done before, that the people in the pipeline community were going to put me in that box, in a women's leadership box. And then I have to remind them, no, I'm chair of the board of a construction company, and I've helped General Motors deliver a $3 billion program on time. And you have to be crystal clear about, to me, it's about what I care about. The commonality of all of that is I want to help people. And I wanted to help women in the pipeline industry. And I said, to heck with it. I don't care if they put me in that box. I'll work hard to make sure they understand the entire brand of Gretchen. And you have to pump yourself up. My coach calls them ta-da lists. I get really down on myself and I'm like, hey girl, you just came to a new country and started a company, made it happen, right? And looking for opportunities and not being afraid to take risks. Like hearing the CEO of the Australian Pipelines and Gas Association, Steve Davies, at the conference 2 weeks after I moved to Australia saying we need to do more for women, and taking him out for coffee and say, hey, there's this women's leadership program at the American Gas Association in America. I've spoken there. Why don't we start it here? It would be fun. So I saw a problem and an opportunity to help. And that's kind of been that, once again, grounding it in your values. I value helping people. My personal mission statement is to leave the world a better place than I found it. So I kind of use that as my compass of what I should do.
That's so amazing. A strong believer, both of us, Laura and I, in making sure that you're aligning with your values and having a greater sense of purpose that keeps you going. Because sometimes I know it's really nice having the positives talked about, but people don't really mention that sometimes things get hard and you don't feel like you can continue. And I guess that's sort of what I wanted to ask you. Have you ever had, moments in all these different stages where you just thought, I can't do this anymore?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. We were living in Canberra. A year and a half into it, I was hired by a company. It all looked great on paper. Moving me to Melbourne, managing director, Asia Pacific. Company was based in Colorado, where I lived for 28 years in Melbourne. Accepted the job December of 19. My start date was March 1. I'm commuting to Melbourne. My apartment's going to be available April 7th, and COVID hits. And I'm now in charge of a team in not only working in construction, but working in banking, healthcare, finance. And I thought, I can't do this. And I sold one big deal. I ended up closing their office in Melbourne, the physical office, right off the bat, because we just knew that, we weren't going to be going back to an office for a while. And then that was 2020, and 23, ending my relationship with my Australian partner. And I'm 3 months into getting my citizenship, and my whole family's back in America. And I think, gosh, what am I going to do? And you buckle down. I described 23 as a year where I was in a blender on 10 the whole year. I bought a place in Melbourne. I bought a place in Kansas City. I started making decisions. You can do this, Gretchen. You can do this. You put a plan in place and execute the plan. And the other thing, and my advice to listeners is, there's all these forks in the road in life. What job you take, who you date, who you marry, where you move, what you do. Pick a fork and go with it. And if it doesn't work out, don't be afraid to pick another fork. I just read a thing that said that there's a Japanese proverb that if you realize you're on the wrong train, get off as fast as you can, because the longer it takes you to get off the train, the more expensive it's going to be to get back. So pick a fork in the road. Don't look back. Sometimes it's not the right fork. I was assistant dean of a business school for 2 years. Wrong fork in the road. Way too much of a rebel for a university in that. Dean used to make me cry. The dean there, me, used to make me cry. So yeah, we all have those insecurities. We all have a little girl or a little boy inside of us. And that's where you need your personal advisory board too. The raving fans that you can go talk to that pump you back up. I have 4 mentors and a paid coach. They're the ones that keep the air in the tires, so to say, on Gretchen.
Yeah. Wow, it's also inspiring. I really like that, I guess, quote that you shared from what you read, because I think there is a stigma when, you've chosen something, or let's talk about careers. You've chosen a career and you don't really feel like it was a good match, probably, and you don't want to continue there and you want to change careers. But the stigma of change, or, like having wasted your time, resources, whatever. Probably puts a lot of pressure on people from taking that, leap of faith and just changing it. So I think it's really valuable that you've shared that, because it's applicable in relationships, it's applicable in career changes, but it's applicable in all other things. Like if you start a project and, it went well, but if it doesn't go well, like, okay, you tried it, but this don't probably waste your energy. It's a good saying and it's a good quote, and I'm really happy because I can resonate to that a lot.
Yeah, and nothing is a waste of time. And I always try and look at the silver lining. I'm a glass half full person, because when I was assistant dean, I loved the outside part. I had 43,000 alumni I was raising money from raising like $17 million a year. That part was really fun. It was the bureaucracy of the university. But my mother was in the last stages of dementia and Alzheimer's, 10 years. And because I was unhappy, very insecure, I just divorced and provided my ex-husband with a significant amount of my resources. But my financial advisor, Steph, who I'm meeting with in a couple of days, I'll have to tell her I shared the story. She said, quit your job and spend time with your mom.
That is such
and
good advice.
I did. And it was a silver lining, because it made it easier, because I was like, I'm really not having that great a time. Gosh, I feel financially insecure. A friend flew to Denver the next week and said, will you be president of my company? And I said, after my mom dies. So I quit in February. My mom was in hospice by August. In October, she passed away. And I became president back in the construction industry, which is where I belonged. And my heart wasn't in being in a university. And for other people, their heart's totally. And I love teaching at a university. But always try and take the good and the learning. Nothing is a waste of time. It's called life. It's a twisty roller coaster. Anybody who's figured out how to only be up on a roller coaster, great, good for you. If you've never had a down period or a curve or something, more power to you. But I've never run into that person yet.
Same.
Yeah.
Wow. There's a few that have the optics on social media, but I don't think that's the whole picture.
Yeah.
That's what social media is for, though.
Yeah, true. That's the highlight reel.
Yeah. So, Gretchen, we met in 2023 at Inside Construction, and I was on a panel debating about women in the industry, was it? Mm-hmm. I don't actually remember the panel name, but I think it was something to do with diversity and inclusion, and how the name just came to me. It was about diversity and inclusion and how to create this diverse environments for women or any minority to thrive in. We've seen that the world has been changing in the past few days, in the past few months, more than anything. From a person like you, we wanted to understand your view on the whole diversity and inclusion change, and if you had anything to share. I understand this is very political, so feel free to reject and run away.
Yeah, no, I think I went down a lot of rabbit holes during my PhD. I found Google Scholar. Oh my gosh. I'm so glad ResearchGate exists now, because it gives free access to academic research, where it used to just be locked away in journals. Why have research if we're not giving it to practitioners that are going to put it in place, right? So I'd find a little research study, like having your phone out is a 40% distraction, even if it's face down. I don't have my briefcase in it. Oh, yes, I do. So you need to just throw your phone in your briefcase. So lots of little not useless, but yes, interesting, but not specific to my study. There is so much research out there that diverse teams make better decisions. It's science. People can debate that, but until you've gone and read a bunch of research studies around diverse teams make better decisions, do we have a backlash against quotas, or how do we bring diverse teams together? We can argue that point, but the science is there that says when you bring people with different socioeconomic backgrounds, different ages. I'm starting a global institute. I don't even know if you know this. I haven't really announced it yet. It's called Women Thriving in Construction. The website's womenthrivingin.construction.org, or you can come to my website, gretchengagel.com. I'm starting a global institute to advance women in construction, because this is my last hurrah in my 60s.
Gretchen, that's amazing. Really looking forward to that.
Yeah, we just published the first global status of women in construction report on 20 countries.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, how do you do this in this day and age of diversity and inclusion? It's like, okay, We're short 750,000 workers in construction in America and 290,000 workers in construction in Australia. And I don't know what the other countries are, but I'm going to go find out. How is it possibly a bad thing when we have less than 4% women in the trades to bring more women into construction? Because we have a shortage, right? So it's not like we're doing it at the expense of men. We just need talented people in our industry. So that's the business case for it, right? We need people. And how do we create an industry where people feel like they belong? Because it's the people that don't feel like they belong that come. And oh, by the way, young men, this happens to them too. They don't want the bullying and harassment and they leave. So that's my take on diversity, equity, and inclusion.
I guess my question more is we see a lot of, we have seen a couple of big name companies. I don't think we need to name them. Yeah, just scrap the committees, I guess, that handle this sort of thing. I'm not sure if that means, they're just not going to look at hiring diversity. Unsure, haven't really seen anything suggested either or. Is it more that something in the way we have done it could be improved and we don't really need it done the way it was the last 5 years? Do you have any thoughts in that sector? Yeah.
It's very complicated. One thing I'm not an expert on is corporate diversity, equity, and inclusion programs. I'm an expert on a lot of things and I have an opinion about a lot of things, but I know companies that have focused on belonging and employee engagement have very high engagement scores, and that's led to rapid revenue growth. When you are attracting the most talented people, however you do that are bringing different thinking. And it's unfortunate that whether it be political pressures or whatever would cause a company to walk away from that. But I know a lot of companies that aren't. So that gives me hope.
It's a complicated subject. It's not just one thing, unfortunately, when it comes to these things. Gretchen, we've really enjoyed having you. And if we could do this a 3-hour podcast, we probably would have a lot to talk about with someone like you and with the experience you have. But we're also mindful that, we have to wrap up at some point. My question and our question, to finalize this, I think we're really interested to know if you have any projects or anything exciting that is coming up. What's next? Anything that you would like to share, something that can leave us more excited? I mean, you just literally dropped the bomb to us that you had this new yes, so I don't know if this is applicable anymore, but something else.
Well, and I have my first grandchild on the way, and I'm very excited about that. And it's the Institute is big, lots of speeches, FutureCon in Brisbane, Associated General Contractors in America, April 9th, Groundbreaking Women in Construction, 900 women will be in that audience in San Diego in June. Just found out this morning I'm speaking at the big oil and gas conference, ECC in America. So getting out there, getting the word out, and really doing whatever I can to help the industry. When I was inducted into the National Academy of Construction in 21, it was very liberating for me. There's only, I think, 480 members, maybe we're up to 500 now in America. And I went, I don't have anything left to prove personally. I can just help other people, help women and men. I coach men. I do leadership programs for men. I'm not, this is how feminism became about a dirty word. I don't understand, because it's about caring about women. So that's a big project. But I have to end with a very funny story, given the name of your podcast, You Don't Look Like an Engineer. Last May, I was flying to Washington, D.C. to the Associated General Contractors Diversity and Inclusion Committee meeting. And I got in a shared ride car in a suit. And my driver said, "Has it been a busy week?" And I said, "Yes, I've been Kansas City, Chicago, DC, New York, pretty typical week." And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, are you a flight attendant?" And I said, "No, I'm actually a business executive. And would you have asked a man that question?" And he said, and he was young, he was probably 30. He said, I probably wouldn't have. And I said, "Well, if you thought he was in aviation, what would you have asked him?" And he said, "I probably would have asked him if he was a pilot." And so this, you don't look like an engineer, when I sit in an airport lounge and someone says, "What do you do?" And I say, "Guess what industry?" They never say construction. They never look at me and say construction. And somehow we have to get the whole image up, and we all look like we belong in construction. We all do belong in construction, and it is an amazing industry. And I really appreciate what both of you are doing with this podcast to lift up that message.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And, women in the industry appreciate what you are doing, because leadership is actually what is going to help us stay in the industry.
Yeah. What you're doing, what you've done, since entering this field and helping, pave the way for so many women all this time. I think if there's we haven't scratched the surface. If ever you have, some more time and all the things you're doing, there's so much we could talk about, leadership or improving women's experiences. It's just too much to delve into, but absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. And thank you also, for accepting the offer to write the book and to also put your learnings into these pages. And it's going to be exciting to read it. We've never been featured in a book as such. So it's going to be really, really excited.
Yeah.
And as soon as it becomes available.
Yeah.
Yes. As soon as it becomes available, we will be promoting it as well, because I think, as you said, we all benefit from it, regardless of our industry and gender.
Yep.
So we will be doing so.
Yes,
thank you so much for your time.
When it's done, yeah.
Thanks for having me as a guest. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.